Jai. So, first of all, I guess I'll have to extend my gratitude for you taking your time to spend with us this afternoon, since time is the most precious, unrenewable resource that we have. So I do really appreciate it. And I think we have to unmute whatever microphone is there in the background so we can have proper attention and focus here. Jai. So I thought a proper place to begin with our topic, which is moving from hostility to hospitality, bhakti as the yoga of unity and cooperation, is to just share with you where my journey began. Since as a 17-year-old teenager, just a year after having been initiated, Harikesh Swami left his position, and that created a phase of great chaos in the yatra, understandably, where many senior devotees and senior leaders left their positions, and somehow or another I was left with becoming the leader of our congregation in Malmö. And that experience during that time, it sort of brought me face to face very clearly and vividly with the challenge that we had in terms of actually coming together in harmony. And in many ways, that experience, that frustration, sort of invoked my interest and my commitment to understanding why. Why was community and relationship and friendship difficult, right? And I wanted to find workable solutions. And so I became deeply passionate about these three challenges, one being the gap of spiritual transformation in the lives of bhakti practitioners, how to go from book knowledge to a direct spiritual experience. And second, the dysfunctions in spiritual friendship, relationship, and communities. How can we attain the ability to cooperate, to find unity? And as Prabhupada said, create a society based on authentic trust and love. And the third challenge being the lack of a holistic spiritual curriculum for systematic training in Krishna consciousness. So that's now more than 20 years ago. And naturally, the topic is very large and it's very important and it's very complex. And you cannot squeeze everything into an hour discussion or presentation, but hopefully we'll be able to touch upon something that will help to bring things a little more into focus in our attention and commitments. So today's presentation has three parts. The first one being, we'll begin by looking at the legacy, at the standard, at the ideal of the Bhakti tradition about unity, cooperation, and community. And then we'll turn in the second part to look at the issue at hand, the challenge, the difficulty about realizing and applying that ideal. Because as His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj said, that what we're doing is not so much about conceptualization. You know, the Bhakti movement is about application. And this, of course, is a theme that many of us are thinking about and talking about. So therefore, we'll end today's presentation by looking at remedy, solution, what's necessary for us to do in order to, as the title says, move from hostility to hospitality and truly realize a more sustainable connection, unity, and community in our Bhakti movement. I like to share with you, just before we start, one of my favorite quotations by the poet Maria Rilke, because it sort of describes the importance of love and community, and also how important and serious it is. So the quotation goes like this: for one soul to love another, that is perhaps the most difficult task that has been entrusted to us. The ultimate task, the final test and proof, the work for which all other work is merely preparation. So at this one, I would just like you to take a moment to reflect upon the title before I begin my first part, in order to involve you a little more. When you think about the theme and the topic of bhakti as the yoga of unity and harmony and cooperation, and the idea of moving from hostility to hospitality, I would like you to formulate one question or doubt that you become aware of in terms of this topic. Something that maybe approaches the edge of your knowledge, of your understanding, and the reality of this topic for you. So we'll take 2 minutes, and it's more effective if you can write it down and see during the discussion if it is addressed, and if not, then you are invited to bring it up during the QA session in the end. So we'll take 2 minutes now to reflect and take the subject to ourselves and think, if what do I wonder about? What is important for me? What is something I may be in doubt about when it comes to community, friendship, and unity? I hope you have found something of interest to you, and we'll come back to your question in the end. So let's begin with the first part, the legacy. So when we think of the Bhakti movement and the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, what is the standard? What is the core value here? Of course, there are a number of them, but community is something that is very, very dear to the hearts of the people who have given us this gift of Krishna consciousness. And I'm thinking, of course, of Srila Prabhupada, especially. As our founder Acharya, in his many recordings, lectures, if we are familiar with that, we find that there are a number of times when Srila Prabhupada became very moved emotionally, and which expressed something that is very close to his heart. And one such instance is when Prabhupada sings the Kirtan, Nam Sankirtan of Srila Narottam Das Thakur. You might have heard that Kirtan. It is very mysterious, very deep, and embodies a great sense of longing, separation. So when Prabhupada comes to the 7th verse, where Srila Narottam says, Tadera charana sebi bhakta sanivas, janma janma hoy e abhilash. That this is my desire, that birth after birth, I may live with those devotees who serve the lotus feet of the 6 Goswamis. And when Srila Prabhupada again and again sings this line, his voice breaks and he becomes deeply affected. So to aspire to become a Vaishnava, the act of committing ourselves to the cultivation of bhakti, it means to embrace a new value system. What's important? What matters most? And among those values, the value of unity, community, centered around satisfying the acharyas, satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is really, really high. In fact, I like to describe it as fundamental, as integral. Integral means that it really is what makes the thing what it is. When we speak about love, when we speak about bhakti, the perfection and the process, it is so much about the loving relationship in community. So our commitment is to true love. And all that we do in Krishna consciousness is about learning to love and to be loved. And in this way become qualified members of the spiritual community. So by bhakti, we become increasingly integrated into divine society. We come closer to Krishna and his associates, and we try to bring others with us. So as Ravina Suruprabhu, in his book, Founder Acharya, he states that salvation for a Gaudiya Vaishnava means socializing into the divine community. In other words, becoming members of the community of Vrindavan, of Navadvip. So spiritual practice of Bhakti Yoga is the way we become fit to join in. So it is important to recognize how essential and central it is to embrace and apply the value of unity, community, and cooperation, right? So Prabhupada's effort was to create a community of devotees, a community in which through their interactions, they would increase their spiritual consciousness more and more. And in their great joy in that circle of intimacy, trust, and affection centered around Krishna, they would just naturally want to invite and initiate more and more people into their shared happiness. So when we speak about the purpose and benefits of community, it's really about preparing and qualifying for entering the spiritual world. And it's about increasing spiritual consciousness and also expanding the circle of devotees. So I would like us to just look at 6 references from the scriptures that emphasize this point. Because if it's one thing that I want to impress upon our hearts from this discussion today, it is really to sort of raise the idea of developing mature patterns of relationship, community, and friendship in our spiritual life as higher in our list of values, something that we need to prioritize and cherish. So the first reference I would like to look at is from the 11th canto, where King Nimi inquires from Shri Prabhupada, one of the 9 Yogendras. He says, how do we overcome Maya, right? How do we cross over the illusory energy of God? And Shri Prabhupada, in his reply, says, one should learn to have friendship with people who have devoted their lives to Krishna. Soridam Krishnatma Nateshu. Soridam, of course, means to be well-wishing friend. And Krishna Atma Nateshu means that for people whom Krishna is the Lord of their life, they have made Krishna the Lord of their souls. So we're talking about devotees. So he says one should learn to have friendship with such people. And he goes on to say one should learn how to associate with the devotees by gathering with them to chant the glories of the Lord. And he says this process is most purifying, and as devotees develop their loving friendship, they will feel mutual happiness and satisfaction in their hearts. And by thus encouraging each other, they can give up material attachment and sense gratification, which is actually the cause of suffering and frustration. So this is the first reference, which is very interesting, that Shri Prabhupada places spiritual friendship and community as such a fundamental and essential part of anyone who aspires to overcome bondage and Maya. And in the second reference is earlier from the third canto, where Sri Kapiladev is instructing his mother. And he says the following: one who offers me respect, but is inimical of others, never attains peace of mind. He says, my dear mother, even if such a person worships with proper rituals and paraphernalia, but who is ignorant of my presence in all living entities, such a person never really pleases me. And therefore he recommends, in the end, he says, Kapiladeva says that, therefore through charitable gifts and attention, as well as through friendly behavior and by viewing all to be alike, one should please me, who abide in all creatures. So Sri Vishwanath, in his commentary to these verses, he says that Lord Kapiladev states these verses somewhat angrily out of affection for his devotees who haven't still brought the importance of becoming well-wishing friends of all and having respectful relationship toward all living entities. He speaks these verses to inspire and correct them. So he says that to worship the Lord while not really learning how to behave toward others it's like imitation worship. And it doesn't, the proof of not having matured in that is that you don't have peace of mind. It's interesting that as long as I haven't learned to truly honor all souls in whom Krishna lives, then I cannot become free from fearfulness in my own consciousness. So that's quite interesting. And the third reference is from the Bhagavad Gita. It's interesting because there are 3 verses especially that define what is true bhakti in our scriptures. One is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, one is from Narada Pancharatra, and the third one is from the last verse of the 11th chapter, where Krishna says, Mat karma krin mat paramo mat bhakta sangavarjitaha nirvaira sarva bhuteshu ya samam eti pandava. So here Krishna is describing who comes to him. And he says, of course, he who is engaged in doing my work, mat karma krin, who considers me as the supreme, makes Krishna the goal of his life, who is devoted to me, who is engaged in devotional service, and who abandons attachment, karma, jnana, or sangha, in this case can also mean ordinary association. And then the last one, nirvaira sarva bhuteshu, which means who is free from enmity, doesn't hate anyone, but is friendly to every living entity. Such a person comes back to me. So it's very interesting that, this is just one of 3 main verses that describe what is bhakti. And already there, Krishna places the lack of hostility as such a fundamental element. And then if we go on still in the Bhagavad Gita, in the next chapter, Krishna, of course, as we know, goes on to describe what makes a person dear to him. And he says, in the very first criteria, adveshta sarva bhutanam maitra karuna evacha, that one who is not hostile, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who hates no one, friendly and compassionate, such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. Krishna says, he by whom no one is put into difficulty and who is not disturbed by anyone, such a devotee is dear to me. So this is evidently very important. And really, if we study the scriptures, we find that Krishna is so transcendental and so loving that for himself, he really doesn't take offense at what his devotee might do. As we know, the example of that great sage who went to Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and to Lord Vishnu to see who is really the supreme deity. And he offered insult to them in different ways. But Lord Vishnu didn't even take insult. This is how transcendental the Lord is. Not only somebody in the mode of goodness can forgive, but somebody who is in pure goodness doesn't even take offense. That's whom we're dealing with. That is Shri Krishna. So what hurts Krishna's heart is rather if there is a tension and conflict between the souls or his devotees. So therefore Krishna places proper relationship or approach to other souls. So important. By that character, he becomes pleased. And finally, the last two references, quickly covering them so we can come to the remaining parts of our presentation. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami describes that true love or bhakti has 6 characteristics, and the second one is that it bestows auspiciousness, shubhada. And Rupa Goswami defines shubhada as having 4 parts. 1, affection for everyone, becoming attractive to all souls, having good qualities, and happiness. Now, it is very interesting that Jiva Goswami says that, well, isn't it like affection for everyone a good quality? Why does Rupa Goswami count it as separate? And he says it's because affection, prinana, really means to please, delight, satisfy, make souls, others happy, to work for their benefit, is not just like a secondary, or in Sanskrit terminology, it's not tatastha lakshana, it's not like secondary characteristics. It is svarupa lakshana. It is what makes a thing what it is. So when we speak about proper character or good quality, affection for others is what makes good qualities good qualities. It is the most important part of proper character. So how important it is. And finally, our last reference, there are many references, but the last reference I would like to offer here is from the Lord's instruction and blessing to the prachetas in the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the Lord says that I'm very much pleased by the friendly relationship among you. All of you are engaged in one occupation, bhakti. And I'm so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish you all good fortune. Please ask a benediction from me. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada points out that how real unity is about offering love and being united around the desire to satisfy the Lord. And this is something that makes the Lord so happy that he becomes immediately inclined to give all protection and all blessing to the devotees and to that community. So we are speaking about community, and I know that these references help to bring out a little more to the forefront of our attention of how central it is. So before we shift to maybe the challenge in this respect, I would just like to offer you a 6-part definition in summary of what do we mean by community, right? We're speaking about community. What is a community? And we can say, 1, a community is a state of being unified, as we said. And in a spiritual community, it is really centered around satisfying Shri Krishna. Second point, a community is the state of having genuine connections or close relationships with each other. It is not impersonal or mechanical or official or formal. People actually have real ties of mutual trust and love with each other. 3, a community is the state of sharing a commitment to each other and to the community and to our shared mission. And commitment really means to stay together in joy and in grief. That's what commitment means. It's not that you turn your back and leave when things become difficult. It's camaraderie. It's like supporting each other and staying with each other till the end. 4, of course, community is the state of collaborating with each other to create something, to realize a mission. Everybody contributing. 5, a community is the state of being holistic. This is very interesting. It means that it involves the whole person. not just their soul, but also their body and emotional reality, their mind. There is care and support holistically. And it's holistic can also be seen as accepting, being, how to say, there's unity among diversity. So it welcomes people of all different specializations and temperaments. It's like we can acknowledge our differences, but still love each other. And finally, 6, this is really the litmus test of a true community, is that it is the state of being more than the sum of its individual members. If it's a true community, we can find like new solutions to problems, creativity. The technical word is synergy. It's not just my way or your way. If there's real trust and open, healthy discussions, often through Krishna's inspiration, a community can find new solutions or create something that is greater than what individual members could do on their own. And we can also say that it is more than the sum of its members, in the sense that Krishna manifests in a community, as we saw in the gopis or in Lord Chaitanya's nocturnal kirtans. The harmony and unity of his devotees is the condition of Krishna's happiness, and where he manifests. He empowers the community to do amazing and wonderful things together. So this is all very wonderful, and something that we've known, but we're emphasizing here. We've seen how important community, friendship, and unity is. But we have to also recognize the reality at hand. And it is that as conditioned souls in the material world, we are living, every conditioned soul to different degrees is living in a state of frustration and alienation from each other. It is a state of disunity. Srila Prabhupada in Adi Lila and Chaitanya Charitamrita in a purport, he says, in the material world, the perverted relationships bring frustration. Of course, we're talking about, admiration, being a follower, a servant, friendships, parenthood, or marriage. So Prabhupada is talking about that, and he's calling them imperfect life is realized in material existence in 5 different imitation relationships we share with everyone. So this is okay, something interesting. Prabhupada has spoken about the ideal of community, and here he says it's not possible, right? In the material world, he says that just as salvation for Vaishnava is understood to be socializing in a spiritual community, damnation is about isolation. It means exclusion as non-cooperative living entities, where we are imprisoned by the walls of our own false ego. So the reality of the fact is that the material world is filled with rebellious souls that from a spiritual point of view are psychotic. They're completely, we are disconnected from a spiritual experience and perspective of ourselves, of others. So it's a very difficult place to find love and community. And Prabhupada in the 4th canto explains why. He says, in the material world, unity is not possible because even though people may officially unite, they have different interests, right? So on the material platform, we cooperate, we make friendship, we create relationships with people who satisfy our attachments and do not challenge our dislikes and aversions, right? We have ichadveshas, these dualities, which is our fundamental illusion. And this is why relationship and communities are never long-lasting, right? And there's no one who has not experienced disillusionment, disappointment, heartbreak, and betrayal. And of course, from pain, this emotional pain, comes hatred. We hate the experience of being stuck in pain. This is what all conditioned souls share. And then, this is why we arrive at the reality of hostility. We hate the cause of our pain, right? And of course, hostility might be open or repressed or cold. There are many different expressions of that. And maybe a way of bringing it a little more home to ourselves is to remind us of the 3 levels of maturity in devotional service, the 3 adhikars, Kanishta, Madhyam, and Uttama. And so we're talking about friendship, proper relationships, unity, and the difficulty in realizing that on the material platform. So, and of course, we know that a madhyama, a person who has actually matured in his spiritual practice and consciousness, the most significant, outstanding mark of that level is knowing and learning the art of relationships. This is very interesting. And I know many of you have also recognized this point, right? Prabhupada says that a person who goes to the temple and worships with great devotion, but does not show sympathy to people in general and respect and friendship to other devotees is considered third-class devotee who's still on the material platform. He says, as long as we have not learned to behave properly toward people who might not have received the gift of bhakti but who are innocent, and devotees who have embraced the shared value of loving Krishna, then we are on the material platform, and on that level we cannot realize community. So it has been noted that the Hare Krishna movement, the Bhakti movement, ISKCON, as a society is functioning as a society of Kanishta Adhikaris. This is very interesting and painful, because although they're individually advanced devotees, but as a major systemic pattern, as culture, there is one of failure in terms of mature friendship among Vaishnavas. So something that maybe will help us to recognize that a little more is something that Sri Vishwanath speaks about in commenting on Kapila Dev's instructions that we heard earlier, that one who worships me but doesn't know how to behave or doesn't respect others does not please me. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur starts to analyze that there are actually 4 degrees of disrespect. And we could say these are like the material platform or the Kanishta Adhikar patterns. This is interesting, so I will share them with you. He says, 1 is avagya, 2nd is upeksha, 3 is dvesha, and 4 is ninda. So this is like increasing levels of disrespect. And he also describes the consequences of them. So avagya, gya, of course, means gyan, knowing or perception, and ava means down. So avagya means really to have a low opinion of somebody. So that level of disrespect is still mental, is still subtle. It's sort of looking down upon somebody, regarding them of little importance. You sort of feel superior and cannot really appreciate the value of the other person. And Vishwanath says, because this in effect means that there is a duplicity, that externally you might be friendly and smile, but internally you have disesteem for that soul. So therefore he says, you're losing simplicity, you're becoming a hypocrite. The result is that you will become a pretender. This is very deep and we don't have time to analyze and explain every one of them. But it says, because you lose the simplicity, there's a difference between what's inside and what's outside, and you become a pretender, and what's inside is projected. So he says that you will also start to perceive everyone as pretenders, because you yourself have lost your own simplicity. The second level of disrespect, he says, upeksha. Upeksha means to neglect, is sort of becoming indifferent, overlooking, disregarding, paying no attention to somebody. It's almost like you deny the existence of somebody else. You become impersonal, right? And he says that when you are behaving in a way that is not respecting another person's existence, in effect, it means that you're not recognizing the presence of God in that person, right? So he says the result of that is that you will lose your faith in God. You're behaving in a way that is not recognizing the presence of the Lord in other people. And the repercussion of that is that your faith will not incline, but decline, because you're actually behaving in a way that cultivates not recognizing, validating the Lord's presence. That is upeksha. Now, this can escalate to dvesha. Dvesha, of course, means hatred, really dislike, aversion. And you cannot stand the other person. And he says that because we have hate in our hearts at that point, or that level of disrespect, then that is projected. And he says that you will begin to see that others are hating you. This is very interesting. Whereas dvesha in our hearts, we will perceive, because our mind is contaminated by enmity, we will project and see that everybody is an enemy. We will feel that the environment is hostile. Like I'm living among enemies, people who might turn against me or not desire good in me. So the fact that Vishwanath describes the consequence of each level of disrespect is so sobering, because it sort of brings it home to us, because we might not recognize the actual disrespect, but it's easy to see the consequence of that. So when we don't feel secure in the environment, then we might have some levels of hostility in our own hearts. And finally, ninda is to openly insult someone. This is when you actually criticize someone, and in a way that is sort of ill-willing, you want to harm or hurt somebody. And of course, this last, more gross level of disrespect will, Vishwanath says, destroy the creeper bhakti. So in an immature community, we will see these different patterns of disrespect, and we need to bring honesty about it with compassion. Not that we hate ourselves or reject ourselves for where we are, but we need to start to recognize the problem in order to take the solution more seriously. So recognizing the difficulty and the lacks in terms of actual love and solidarity in community, it can actually give rise to sadness and hopelessness in our hearts, because it is very difficult and it is very deep. But fortunately, by the grace of Prabhupada and the Acharyas, there is a pathway, there is a promise, there is a possibility. And so we don't have to end on a note of grief, but one of commitment to a new reality. So there are three phases of our relationship, love, where we begin with idealizing, being romantic and fairy tale about, the possibility, and we take it for granted and we think it's easy. And then we're confronted with the reality, and then we become disenchanted. This is the second phase of the journey. And we become anxious, maybe fearful, or at worst, because of disappointment, we might actually become bitter and give up. And, I don't believe in friendship or community. But where we need to go is maturity, learning to recognize and overcome the impediments to friendship and solidarity. So what is that pathway? What is that solution that has been given to us? And of course, Kali Yuga is a place where everything that is actually important is taken for granted. Community, love, friendship are easy words, but they're not easily applied, and nobody teaches them. Friendship is not just a friendship request on a social media. It goes deeper and it demands more of us. So, and I found it so wonderful that although so many arts, as one being community and friendship, has been lost, Sri Kavi Karnapura, the son of Sri Shivananda Sena, has left us a legacy, a blueprint, a design, a formula. in his Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka, where he traces the genealogy of friendship. And of course, for Gaudiya Vaishnava, for spiritual person, nothing is impersonal. So he recognizes friendship as having a personified form, personified deity. And he recognizes the genealogy of friendship. You know, when you trace the line of descent, you know, who's the parent, where does friendship come from, you know. And so I would like us to end by looking at that. So I will try to share my screen here. So I guess that the host needs to enable my screen sharing. Gaurahari Prabhu, if we can do that.
Yes, sure. I'm doing right now.
Okay.
Should work now.
Jai, let me see. Okay, sharing the screen. And here we go. Share. And let me see. If I can make that bigger screen and larger. So, are you seeing this successfully?
Yes, we get it. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. So, I will first just give you the technical words so you get the blueprint. So he says that Bhagavad Anugraha, and of course he's talking about as personified forms, but here we can just take them as, you know, a cultivation or practice or something that happens. He says Bhagavad Anugraha in combination with Bhagavad Janasakti, this is the original couple, so to speak, will give rise to Bhakti and Viveka. I will describe shortly what this means, but we will just give you the blueprint here. So from Bhagavad Anugraha, Bhagavad Janasakti comes Bhakti and Viveka. And when Bhakti and Viveka is combined with Mati, then we get the third generation, which is Anasuya. And when Anasuya is combined with Samabhava, and then we get these three children, Svabhavaja, Shuddha, and the theme of our discussion here, Maitri, friendship. Right, so now let's try to fill in what this actually means. And of course, we can dedicate a webinar to this, and it should be done, but I would just like to give you a trailer. So Bhagavad Anugraha, of course, means mercy of the Lord, Krishna's grace. And that manifests really as coming in touch with the spiritual master, with the pure devotee of the Lord. And when we come in touch with that devotee of the Lord and we develop attachment and affection for the spiritual master and the acharyas and the pure senior devotees, then that combination of mercy and attachment will give rise to bhakti, which means devotional service, sadhana bhakti, and spiritual knowledge. Viveka means to be able to discern truth from illusion. We get proper understanding. So far, I guess everybody is with us. We understand that from Krishna's mercy and the spiritual master, we get bhakti and we get knowledge. And then he says, if bhakti and knowledge is combined with mati, which means thoughtfulness, which means deep thought and reflection, you want to digest, you want to understand and apply what you've learned. And that involves very much identifying and correcting what is incongruity in your behavior, where you see that your own beliefs goes against what you're hearing and trying to correct those imbalances of values, what's important, what to do, right? This is very interesting. And at least that's at least one of the missing links, in a Kanishta Adhikari society, because you do not study the scriptures systematically and thoughtfully. You don't hear, combine Shravana with actually digesting what you've heard. So he says, if you are actually practicing spiritual life, which means chanting 16 rounds attentively, following the 4 regulative principles, and dedicating yourself substantially to the narrations of the Lord, combined with proper thoughtfulness, if that's not happening, we cannot at all talk about friendship. Prabhupada says, when you establish your relationship with Krishna, that makes you qualified for establishing friendship with devotees. Another reference, where Rupa Goswami in his 4th verse of Upadeshamrita speaks about friendship or symptoms of love, but that's the 4th verse after verse 1, 2, and 3, which is about spiritual reform in your own life, right? So we can give so many references about how friendship is not possible without the foundation of bhakti, of actually becoming purified. So that concept of purification takes us to anasuya. If you're doing it properly, then this will happen, the absence of hostility. This is very interesting because asuya, as you see here, means to be displeased or discontented, indignation, all based on a desire for personal gratification. I put in reference as a modern terminology, neurotic needs, hypersensitive about some personal attachment, preference, or prejudice. You see, because as we saw, all forms of dislike comes from ichas, our own material attachments and preferences, where we're looking for what's in it for me, my comfort, my preferences, right? So this is really conditional love, right? But through proper purification and understanding and correcting our value system and beliefs, we start to release the expectation. We don't hold our preferences so strongly anymore. And therefore, we do not become displeased with others when they don't live up to our, preferences, right? We start to accept that on the material universe, we cannot expect perfection. And just because of that, we cannot hate people or isolate ourselves, because that's very dangerous. So we start to become more and more free from hostility. So that internal purification, if combined with samabhava, which I have translated as composure. Composure really means that you're balanced in your reactions and response, right? You're calm and in control of yourself. It's the ability to tolerate dualities, happiness and distress, right? So when things happen that are difficult, or problems arise, or disappointment arise, you don't overreact, right? You're able to remain consistent, steady, and a well-wisher. This is very interesting. So as I said, this is so deep, and this is so wonderful because so many implications come from it. But the understanding is that the foundation of friendship really is that we come to that state of purification where there is no displeasure in our hearts toward others, hostility, and we're very steady in our behavior. We are able to tolerate, just like Krishna says, matra sparshas tu kanteya, the sensations of material experience. We remain steady in our commitment to the community, in our commitment to our friends, in our commitment to do good to others. That's what Krishna describes as unconditional love. You remain well-wisher. So where that is, then you can become authentic. These are the 3 things. You can become pure, and you will realize friendship. So we're already over time. So I will just take 1 or 2 minutes to say some last final words. But first, I will stop sharing the screen. And here we go. So I wrote a reminder for myself here that it's really about waking up from Maya to Krishna consciousness. But as a footnote, I would say to be able to do this and realize community, I've realized that as devotees, unfortunately, because we're living in a society, we are brought up in a society that is based on a mode of passion and ignorance, we also need to grow up emotionally. And we also need to clean up in terms of, past repressed traumas or childhood conclusions about people. You cannot trust anyone, or, all friendship is selfish. We carry so many ignorant baggage, right? So I found that where we wake up in Krishna consciousness, if it's also combined, at least during sadhana bhakti, where we have not come to bhava, which completely destroys the sara body, we also need to take responsibility to develop our character, to develop discipline, to develop freedom from old baggage that might, override our desire to be friends and respectful toward others. Because the reality is, if we haven't become purified, and those old conditioned beliefs and attachments are there, when we become tired, lonely, sad, or disappointment, it's very hard to not react, becoming defensive, right? So repressed belief systems and emotional baggage is not purified through unsteady devotional service, motivated devotional service, offensive devotional service. So therefore we need to combine waking up to Krishna consciousness with growing up also. So just a last footnote, based on my own 20 plus years of experience working on developing community and friendship and Krishna consciousness. So this is the last word I will say, that any art demands a theory and a practice. And when it comes to the practice, we need to place that art as a supreme concern. It cannot be a secondary thing. Because if we take it really seriously, then we can dedicate discipline to it, we can focus on it, and we can remain patient and not give up when things take a little time. So I finish with this Franciscan blessing that I shared with the Goloka devotees before, which I think is nice. He says that, may God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. So I pray that today's discussion has helped, at least, because it always begins with bringing the value to the forefront and higher in our list of what's important. If we can do that, then I am most grateful. Of course, the second step is to actually commit to a plan of action, but that can come later on. We're not all ready maybe to do that. But if we can start to understand how important it is to move from hostility to hospitality, unity, cooperation, community as an essential part of being a Vaishnava, then today's discussion will have been fruitful. So thank you so much once again for your time, and we can open up here if there is comment or a question.
Thank you so much, Ratna, Bhusana. It's so refreshing and so happy to hear you again. Here is Vajayanti next to me, and she would have a question. She can directly speak on the.
Hare Krishna, dear Ratna Bhusana.
Hare Krishna, Vajayanti Mataji.
So my question will be what the question that I had also at the beginning. It also my question was: is it really possible to develop a community unless we rise to the platform of Madhyam? That was the question at the beginning when you asked it in these 2 minutes. So I think you spoke quite lengthily on this. And but the other question is, so because we are not on that level many times, so how to deal there, also in situation where it can be also already like, because it was very nicely also this description from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, where you can see also the consequences, and we can see the consciousness and like this. So if these things are happening, so and it takes some time to arrive to the Madhyam platform, so what to do in between to still have a stable community and work together, and so that would be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very good and relevant. Things do not change overnight. So how do we move on from where we are? I once remember Burijan Prabhu saying that wisdom is recognizing the ideal, but also the reality, and then gradually moving toward that ideal. It's a combination of acceptance for where we are and our value. If you're just idealistic, that might create perfectionistic problems. And if you just sort of just recognize what is, you can become complacent and resigned. So my experience is that what really unites us and is the place to begin is creating that place of honesty. If at least the community is educated enough to recognize the themes we spoke about, so everybody's on the same page, we know what is the goal, and then we know the challenges, then to be able to share, our aspiration, but also our challenges. It's really our imperfections that unites us in the beginning. It's this sort of counterintuitive, because during our childhood, we learn that we have to be correct and perfect to deserve love. But the reality is that as sincere adult, mature, we're trying to mature, it's just that humility about where I am, and I'm moving towards my values, that acceptance for the whole of me, my faith and my doubts, my excellences, but also my heartbreak and griefs and difficulties, that creates a place of truthfulness, where we can relax a little more, not complacent, but sort of the defenses go down and it really helps to inspire that sense of friendship. You're not sort of uniting around your failures and sort of making that acceptable. We're accepting that, but we're also respecting our ideals. Prabhupada says in the beginning, we cannot live up to all Krishna's injunctions, but we should not become hopeless or dejected, right, and give up. We continue to aspire from where we are honestly and frankly, and we will be blessed with perfection. So to create a place, that's why I entitled, this institute and educational platform trying to develop as Soul Lab, because a laboratory is a place where you experiment, and it's okay to make mistakes, and you learn from your mistakes, right? So a place where we can elevate our consciousness, and it's a culture of respecting the whole devotee, not just, when they're happy and when they are perfect, but also as they're aspiring to apply the values that are difficult to realize, because unless the necessary purification, realization takes place, you cannot artificially always embody the virtues, right? So that's what I would say.
Thank you very much, Ratna Bhusana. Should we take one more question, or should we end here?
Sure, let's take one more question.
I don't see anyone pointing finger here, but maybe I just take the opportunity. When we see in the community there is suddenly one member having those time of pattern that you were mentioning, maybe they neglect or they don't look at each other because they have some difficulty on that. What is the way to proceed? It seems to me it would be more to communicate with them and discuss with them and help them to express what is happening inside, but sometimes it could be that the person is not willing to communicate. Or how do you try to help the situation when this type of symptoms comes up?
If I understood correctly, so you're seeing maybe members of a community where they're manifesting this sort of impersonal behavior, and you're thinking as a third partner how you might help the situation. Have I understood it correctly?
Yeah, it could be like this, or it could be that you are the person that is neglected as well. So it can be in the third partner, or in any case, how to adjust.
So of course, everything begins with feeling a little more secure, and where there is some degrees of trust. Because if we approach a difficulty from a place of blame, then immediately defenses goes up, and people feel insecure, and doesn't work. But if we can come together from a place of both partners wanting to open up to learning about what is love, and what is friendship, and what is the loving response I need to learn in this situation, both of us. Usually those sort of approaches are much more effective, because where there's defensiveness, there cannot be any learning. But if we can choose, I want to learn what is the truth, what is happening here, and what is the correct way of proceeding, both persons. And as I said, where there is an honest and respectful communication between two Vaishnavas, Krishna manifests as a third partner. So, and then he can inspire insights as what is the problem, what is it the story, a false story we're telling us and interpreting the situation. And that's why it's also very important for devotees to grow up, because if the feeling is that I will respect myself, I will respect you, and you will offer me the same charity in terms of not being perfect, but wanting to move in that direction, that can create the space of learning. Otherwise, people will not put their hearts on the line and speak their truths. So I guess we can open up the dialogue with that I also want to learn how to love, and how to correct myself, and what is the difficulty to analyze it, what is the cause of this behavior. Because many times when we take somebody else's behavior as personal, as reflecting something about me, 99.9999% of the time, it's about something that is happening in their minds. Something like that triggers some insecurity that they're dealing with, or fearfulness, or just they're not happy with themselves. Ravina Prabhu dedicated a whole seminar to cure of souls, or how devotees react to the sense of personal failure in a healthy way, unhealthy way. So many times those impersonal behaviors is really about trying to protect one's vulnerability, where I feel I'm not living up to the proper values that I have. So if we can open up a respectful communication of acceptance, then it's so much easier to understand what is happening. We don't take things personally, and then we can also start to grow up, clean up, and wake up together. So that's something that comes to me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Bye.
It has been a pleasure to have you for Sunday Feast, to see you, and feel very grateful. Yeah, very grateful for your presentation. I think it was very relevant for our community and any of the community, and very well presented, and with all the different quotes, and was very fantastic. I think refreshing also for us who are listening, and yeah, very grateful, and thank you so much. Hope we
Thank you so much, Gaura Hari Prabhu, for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to share. It's very precious, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.